The sun was a brass nail pinning the sky to the world. Jed Stone felt it in his skull, a dull, throbbing ache that matched the gait of his horse. He wasn't running anymore. He was just ... moving. Running implied a destination, a frantic hope of a way. He was past that. He was just putting miles between him and the scorched black memory of Abilene, and the 3 men who'd sworn to see him dance on air. His horse, a bony gelding named Bolo, was the only living creature he'd spoken to in a week. Bolo was smarter than most men Jed knew, and considerably more loyal. It was Bolo who stopped first. The horse lifted its head, ears swiveling forward, and let out a low nicker that wasn't a greeting. It was a question. Jed pulled on the reins, his eyes scanning the endless, shimmering line of the horizon. "What is it, boy?" he rasped, his throat sandpaper-dried. And then he saw it. It was an aberration, a smudge on the landscape. In this part of the panhandle, anything taller than a man's knee was a landmark. This was a tree, a lone, half-dead cottonwood, its branches clawing at the sky like a drowning man. It was the only shade for 50 miles, and someone was already using it. He saw the other horse first, a decent-looking bay, saddled and standing ground-hitched, as if its owner were just taking a siesta. But Jed's eyes, trained by years of looking for things that didn't want to be seen, saw the other shape, the one that wasn't standing. It was in the tree. A cold knot formed in his gut. This was wrong. He slid from Bolo's back, his rifle in his hand before his boot hit the parched earth. He left Bolo untied. The horse wouldn't leave him. He crept forward, low and slow, his gaze sweeping the ground for tracks, for movement. He saw the hat first, his own. He didn't remember taking it off, but there it was, lying on the dusty ground 10 feet from him. He must have swiped it off his head in disbelief, his mind rejecting what his eyes were seeing. He crouched, his gaze lifting. A woman. She was hanging from the lowest, thickest branch, her arms stretched high above her head. Her wrists were bound to the wood with what looked like strips of rawhide. Her dress, a simple fawn-colored shift, was torn and smeared with dirt and something dark. Her feet dangled a good 2 feet off the ground. She was alive. Her head was up, her eyes wide, fixed on him. They were the color of a summer sky, and just as full of terror. Jed stayed where he was, crouching, his rifle balanced on his knee. His mind, which had been a dull, sun-baked fog, was suddenly sharp, cold, and clear. "This, a trap," he called out. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. The woman shook her head, a tiny, frantic motion that made her whole body twist on the thongs. A whimper escaped her. "Please, help me, ... Jed didn't move. He scanned the plains again. The bay horse hadn't twitched. The wind soughed through the brittle grass, the only sound. Who did this? Men. 3 of them, she gasped. Her voice was thin, cracking. They took my husband. From our claim. They ... left me, please. 3 men. The number hit Jed like a fist, the same number that was hunting him. He cursed, low and viciously. "They comin' back? I don't know. Hours ago. They rode west. Please, it hurts." Jed stood slowly, deliberately. He slung his rifle over his shoulder. He walked to his hat, picked it up, and beat the dust from it against his thigh before settling it back on his head. He looked at her. She was young, maybe tough, by the looks of her, but the sun and the agony were breaking her. He walked past her and over to the bay horse. He checked its saddlebags. They were empty, save for a small, carved wooden bird. He ran his hand over the horse's flank. It was branded with a simple H. "This, your horse. My husband's. Henry's," she whispered. Jed grunted. He walked back to Bolo, pulled his canteen, and returned to the woman. He held it up. "Can you?" She strained, trying to reach it with her mouth, but she was too high. The effort sent a fresh wave of pain through her, and her face went white. "All right, hold on," Jed muttered. This was a complication he didn't need, a complication that could get him killed. The posse from Abilene couldn't be more than a day behind. He needed to be moving, fast and light. A half-dead woman wasn't part of that plan. He looked at her again, at the raw, bleeding lines on her wrists, at the desperation in her eyes. He thought of his sister, Sarah, and the look in her eyes just before he'd left Texas, a lifetime ago. "Damn, this whole damned country," he said. He holstered his pistol and pulled his knife. The branch was high. He couldn't just slice her down. She'd fall and break her neck. "Gonna put Bolo under you," he said. "When I cut, you fall on him. You understand?" She nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. He led his horse under her, positioning the saddle directly beneath her feet. "All right, brace yourself." He reached up, his knife flashing. He saw it at the first rawhide strip. It was tough, dried hard. He put his shoulder into it, and it suddenly gave way. Her body slumped, all her weight dropping onto the one arm. A choked scream tore from her throat. "Almost," he grunted, cutting the second strip. She fell. It wasn't graceful. She collapsed onto Bolo's saddle, a heap of limbs and torn cloth. Bolo, bless him, stood rock steady, used to Jed's erratic behavior. Jed grabbed her before she could slide off. He was struck by how light she was, all sinew and bone. He eased her to the ground, propping her against the meager trunk of the cottonwood. She crumpled, sobbing, trying to cradle her arms, but the movement was too much. Her shoulders were likely half out of their sockets. "Drink," he said, pressing the canteen to her lips. She drank, greedy and desperate, water spilling down her chin. When she'd had her fill, she coughed, leaning her head back against the bark, her eyes closed. "My name is Clara," she said to the sky. "Clara Holloway." "Jed," he replied, taking a swig from the canteen himself before corking it. "You said they took your husband? Where?" "Our claim. Half a day's ride north, by the dry creek bed. They, ... They wanted our wagon, our mule. We, ... We didn't have anything else. Henry, ... He tried to fight. Her voice broke. 3 men, you said. What did they look like?" One was big, a scar on his face, red shirt. The other 2, just mean. They laughed. "Not his men, then." "His men were a gambler, a bank clerk, and a U.S. Marshal. None of them would be wearing a red shirt, and none of them would be laughing. This was a different kind of trouble." "They rode west," Jed said, mostly to himself, towards the Cimarron. "Please," she said, opening her eyes. They were pleading. "My Henry, you have to. We have to find him." Jed's face hardened. He looked north, then south, in the direction he'd been going. "No, we ain't doing anything, ma'am. I cut you down. That's all I can do. I'm heading south. You can take your horse and ride for wherever you came from." Her face, which had held a fragile flicker of hope, crumpled. We came from Illinois. There is nowhere. There's just the claim. And Henry, you can't just leave me. I can't ride. My arms." He knew she was right. Her wrists were raw meat, and her shoulders were badly sprained. She couldn't hold reins, let alone pull herself into a saddle. He was trapped by this woman, by this tree, by the single decent act he'd performed in the last 5 years. He ran a hand over his face. "All right. God, ... All right. There's a settlement, Last Chance Creek, 'bout 2 days south. It ain't much, but it's people. I'll take you there. But that's it. I ain't going north. I ain't looking for your husband. He's likely dead. And if he ain't, he's better off than you are right now. You understand?" The words were brutal, but he meant them to be. He didn't have time for false hope. Clara stared at him, the tears drying on her face. She saw the hardness in his eyes, the set of his jaw. He meant it. She swallowed, the small, clicking sound loud in the silence. Yes, she whispered. I understand. Good. Getting her on the horse was an ordeal. He had to lift her clean into the saddle of the bay. She bit her lip to keep from screaming as her arms were jostled. He wrapped her hands in strips of cloth torn from his own bedroll. He tied the bay's reins to Bolo's saddle horn. He mounted Bolo, took one last look around, and kicked his horse into a walk, heading south, away from her husband, away from the men who'd done this, and, he hoped, away from the men who were hunting him. They rode for the rest of the day, a two-person funeral procession against a vast, indifferent landscape. Jed didn't speak. He pushed the horses, his eyes constantly scanning their back trail. Clara, for her part, was silent, locked in her own private hell. She swayed in the saddle, but she didn't fall. As dusk turned the sky from orange to a deep, bruised purple, Jed called a halt in a shallow arroyo. We rest here, he said, dismounting. He lifted her down from the bay. Her legs gave out, and he had to half carry her to the shelter of the dry bank. He built a small, smokeless fire from dried scrub, keeping it low in the ditch. He handed her a piece of hardtack and some jerky. She tried to eat, but her bandaged hands couldn't grip it. Jed sighed, a long, weary sound. He sat beside her, took the jerky, and sliced off a small piece with his knife. He handed it to her. She took it, their fingers brushing. His hands were calloused and rough. Hers were shaking. Why are you out here? She asked, her voice quiet. Just passing through, he said, staring into the fire. You're running from someone. It wasn't a question. His head snapped up, his eyes sharp. What makes you say that? His head snapped up, his eyes sharp. What makes you say that?